I need to tell you a quick story to explain my thought process behind the video. So, when I was in high school, I ran cross country and I'd been running for, I don't know, 8 years. And they took me in to the middle school and they're like, hey, we're gonna have you coach or mentor some of the middle school runners. And I didn't know what the hell I was doing. I could answer any question they came up to me with, but when they just straight out said, hey, make them better, I couldn't really do it. Similar to Eternal Return, I feel like I've been kind of far removed from the beginner experience. I tried to dip my toes back into the new player water, but I think the most efficient way to go about this is to ask you guys directly. So you guys responded with 40 some questions for me to answer, and I'm gonna do so in this video, so strap in, boys. Legion asks, once you finish your build, should you aim for more food, get gold gear, maybe hunt for other players, and does it depend on what character you're using? So I'm going to say yes, it depends on what character you're using. If you're Nadine, you're obviously going to want to just focus on hunting in the early game. Xiukai are going to want to focus on making food. And then some characters, like Luke, if you've seen him in your games, are probably better at picking up early kills than others. But the answer is you just kind of have to have an objective. As long as you're not roaming around doing nothing, you're probably going to stay in the game and it's going to feel a lot better because you'll be scaling in mastery. Just as no matter what you do, make sure you have food. You can prep it as you're routing, as you're crafting your stuff. You are also routing around after you're crafted. Make sure you're hunting and keeping your mastery up. So Black Omega with a longer question, but I'm going to paraphrase it. How do I know I'm improving in any way? Honestly, the biggest way you can figure out if you're improving or not is playing ranked. Ranked doesn't pop as much as other games, really. It's anytime after 6 p.m. Eastern. Lower queue is going to have a better time popping than higher queue. And that's just for the NA server. A lot of other servers might not pop. So if you're in that boat, I'd go on websites like dac.gg. You can look at stats and you can look at your progression over games. That's what I did a lot when I was first starting. If you have a game that you're like, dang, I really just felt outclassed in that fight, you can take a look at the player who killed you and see their MMR, and then you can also see the full MMR of the lobbies to get more of a grasp of where you're at. So the next question from Woobin is, how do I keep my weapon mastery up? And along with that, what are the basics of routing? So when it comes to routing, really, it's just aim for your next zone. Look at your map and see where you need to go. There's distributions, so early game you're going to get all of your loot guaranteed as long as you hit the 5 boxes that are closest together. Other than that, the way to keep your mastery up is just keep farming, and then you can also poke around with other players. Even if you don't win or no one dies in the fight, you still get mastery from it. So Crimson Inkwell asks, I want an effective way to train and get used to the game because I'm new to MOBAs in general. So I would say getting used to the game mechanics and game language is going to be easiest in bot games. I've heard a lot of success from players I've helped coach, and they said I ran a few bot games before I try a new character, and that's very helpful. Other than that, when you start playing, you're put into a new player queue, and yeah, the game should be a little bit easier from there. If you're just new to MOBAs in general, I just try to play around in the practice tool until you feel comfortable with your character. There's a lot of tools the game gives you to put you into an environment that isn't hyper competitive, so I take advantage of those. XF Panic Kid asks, how do I accurately aim in a fight, and when is the right time to fight in squads? So aiming, you can A-click if it's an auto, and then with the abilities, you're just going to have to get used to the character. Some are a little easier than others. It's a little easier to hit skill shots as someone like Hart than it is with someone like Adriana. For fighting in a squad, I just make sure that your mastery is around the same as the other squads. Even if your full build, you might be behind because they're farming animals or getting in more fights than you guys are. So I'd peep that, and if you constantly find yourself falling behind, do what I said in previous tips to keep your mastery up. The next question is from Vex Kane, and I think this is an amazing question. How long do you spend searching for a component? And when do you move on? And how do you change your route when that complication arises? So the things that I would do is if you find yourself in a zone too long and you're making like circles or you're looping back, I wouldn't do that and I just go on to your next zone. It's tough because some builds you need specific items. I'd keep track of what builds into your weapon and make sure you're at least getting those. Other than that, if you miss one or two things, you can go to the next zone, and I wouldn't scrap your build. I just find another zone that has that resource in it. And usually this can be done by just TPing from the last zone that you have on your route. I thought this next question was interesting from Gungi Womp. So they say they're relatively new. They really just do their own thing. Don't look at saved plans too much. But they're wondering, are there any items or gear that might look good stat-wise, but actually end up being underwhelming and niche? Unfortunately, that does happen quite a bit. I've noticed when Nimble Neuron tries to put like a passive on an item, a lot of the times it won't get used because the stats are underwhelming compared to other items, and the passive usually doesn't make the item very good. I'm worried Scotty might get that treatment, but right now the best example I can think of is Smoke Bomb. People don't build that, at least by itself, because the passive only slows for 1 second and then goes on a cooldown, and it's not really worth giving up all the attack speed that you get from an item like Smoke Bomb. So with Sanetics question, I've answered most of this, but I really like this portion of it. What I noticed and find as a new character is understanding proper pacing, such as when your build should be ideally finished. And I tell anyone I look at replays for is the staple is night 1. Some point in night 1 you want it to be finished. The earlier in night 1, the better. So Shrimp Rolls asks, how do you manage inventory early on when you have more mats than inventory space? And by mats, I'm thinking he means like items or resources. Mats is more of a Fortnite term, but hear me out. So sometimes there's just builds that are very inventory intensive, and this is because you want to get online as fast as you can. The biggest thing I have done to kind of overcome this is know what items that you need to grab first in a certain area, because they will build into like more items and clear up inventory space. So if you notice, all you need is leather for your weapon, and then you can upgrade it 3 times. Grab that leather and you're gonna clear up so much inventory space. Some builds and routes are just unavoidable that it's gonna be a mess, and I just recommend dropping food or water and using that space to clear up your inventory. Okay, so Fella asks, how do you get used to and adapt to different builds, and what if you mess up? Also, what is the best food and how do you cook it? So first, starting off, fish and chips, best food. You're gonna get some French fries from potatoes and heated oil, and then you're gonna grab some fish and some heated oil. Now you gotta throw them all together and you got fish and chips, right? Next up, the way I get used to builds is just repetition, but once you get a build or two down, it's gonna be easier to learn other people's builds because there's gonna be item overlap and you're just gonna get used to it. If you mess up, I wouldn't panic. You craft the wrong thing, just keep routing through your zones, and whatever you're still missing by the end of your routing, just TP to wherever you need to go and put it back together. Alright, so Casual V1 asks, how many games did it take you to feel comfortable on Adriana? And what Adriana skin do you want to be released next? So for the skin, looking at all the Immortal Soul skins that she has, I really like the Lubu Adriana look. That one's my favorite. And then it probably took like 200 games to get used to Adri. That feels like a lot, but Adri's probably one of the harder characters in the game, and I was learning the game as I was learning Adriana, so it was a pretty messy combo to start. Will you drop the spicy solo tier list at some point? The meta changes so much, like literally every patch, so I don't want to record a video on it. I've done 1 or 2 on my stream, but I don't really value my solo's opinion too highly. I play only 1 or 2 characters, so my opinion's pretty biased. How do you get put into games with League Pros if my account is in low 30s and I'm trash? Once you get out of new player queue, they just kind of dish you in with everyone. If you want a more competitive environment, I'd suggest queuing ranked at night. What is your favorite and least favorite matchup to play? My favorite matchup is Adriana Adri. I think that is a really fun skill-based matchup, and I have a lot of fun with it. Least favorite matchup to play, Hun Wu. Getting smashed into a wall is definitely no fun. Any tips on traps? I know I should be crafting them, but I don't know how to start making them and using them. So you can look up a bunch of trap recipes in the crafting menu. I'd suggest maybe double guillotines. Unless you're ISIL, you really don't have to be creating traps. I don't worry about traps very often just because I don't have fun making them. So if you don't like making them, don't. When to use and where to place your cams. So I place my cameras pretty much where I think people are going to come in from. The best time to use them is when you're contesting objectives, or maybe you're looking to pick up a kill somewhere. How to play into counter matchups. You can't win if you're up in mastering items. So some things that I do is I wait to third party. If it's just you two, you can do things like build traps to even the playing field. What are meta items as of right now and best settings to use? The items are definitely going to depend on each character, but some items that I think are really good are the ones with VF blood. I feel like if you get Wick nowadays, the items you get are great, and then the Wick buff is huge. So it feels like the meta is very Wick oriented. Settings, I just say whatever you're comfortable with. Do you think Adri is stronger with or without Dragon? I'm hoping you mean Wick. I hope you mean Wick, man, and definitely stronger. Why is Reese's Puffs NA's best Nathapon? Hey, you gotta prove that to me. That's not a question I can answer. Common and easy foods to get to stay alive longer in fights. I think fried chicken is a really easy recipe, just heated oil and meat. I'd get used to that one. Any good tips when and when not to fight a player? I'd check their mastery. You can F8 to see their mastery above their head, but I just press tab. What's the Adri Toma confirmed best pipe tobacco brand? I do have to buy a pipe for my Adriana cosplay, but I do not smoke. How do you create efficient routes and save plans? It gets boring following others. Well, what I do is I take the items that I want and then just kind of theory craft on what could be a good routing. If it has more than 6 zones, I'd scrap it. But yeah, just go from there. What's the most hated character in the Eternal Return community? It's kind of flavor of the month, to be honest. Sometimes people hate Emma, sometimes people hate Sisla. Usually it's mages that are a little bit overpowered, but it's who you're talking to. Right now, I think Aya has a lot of hate towards her, and Lennox, just because both are kind of strong. How do I get Senpai Adri Toma to notice me? Come to my Twitch stream. I read all my comments. It's kind of like my YouTube, how I respond to everything. I do the same on Twitch. Last question from Reese is, how do you keep your sanity? And if I'm gonna be honest, I know this is a meme question, but when I'm playing ranked queue, if I'm not having a good time at any point, I stop queuing. And then I go to normals and I'll play something that's a lot more fun for me. Hopefully you guys enjoyed that. A lot of questions asked. I responded to all of them on my community post. Go take a look at that if you want to see all the answers. There might be stuff that I left out of the video, but it's probably because it overlapped a little with other questions. But yeah, everyone have a great day, have great holidays, and if there's any more questions you want to answer, leave them in the comments of this YouTube video. I'll go ahead and answer them.